A people enslaved, the plight in Egypt, the story of a people bound in chains, their spirits yearning for freedom, their hearts heavy with the weight of oppression. The Nile River Valley, a cradle of civilization, bore witness to a tale of immense suffering and extraordinary courage. This fertile land, which had once been a beacon of prosperity, now echoed with the cries of the oppressed. In the land of Egypt, the Israelites, descendants of Jacob, toiled under the yoke of Pharaoh's oppression. Their days were filled with back-breaking labor, their nights with dreams of liberation. They built grand cities and monuments, their sweat and blood watering the fields of their captors. The towering structures that stood as symbols of Egyptian might were, in truth, monuments to the suffering of the Israelites. Each day was a struggle for survival, their cries for freedom lost in the desert wind. The harsh sun beat down upon them and the desert sands seemed to swallow their hopes. Generations had passed since Joseph, son of Jacob, had risen to prominence in Egypt, saving the land from famine. His legacy, once a source of pride, had faded into the annals of history. But time had eroded the memory of his deeds, and the Israelites found themselves labeled as a threat, their growing numbers a source of fear for the Pharaoh. The once favored people were now seen as a potential uprising. He decreed their enslavement, hoping to break their spirit and ensure his power remained unchallenged. The Pharaoh's edicts were harsh, designed to crush any hope of rebellion. The Israelites, stripped of their dignity and freedom, cried out to their God, a God who had promised them a land flowing with milk and honey. Their faith was their only solace, a beacon in the darkness. They clung to the stories of their ancestors, the promises whispered from generation to generation. Around the fires at night, they recounted the tales of old, of a covenant that would not be forgotten. They yearned for deliverance, for a leader to guide them out of the darkness and into the light of freedom. Their hearts beat with a collective hope, a hope that one day their suffering would end. Their prayers, echoing through the centuries, would soon be answered. The heavens seemed to listen, and the earth itself seemed to stir in anticipation. A deliverer was to be born, a shepherd destined to lead his flock out of bondage and into the annals of history. This leader would rise from humble beginnings to become a beacon of hope. This is their story, the story of the Exodus, a testament to the enduring power of faith and the unyielding pursuit of freedom. It is a saga of resilience, of a people who, despite the odds, never lost sight of the promise of a better tomorrow. A whisper in the reeds, the birth of Moses. In the stillness of the early morning, the Nile River flowed gently, its waters whispering secrets of ancient times. The reeds swayed softly, as if in anticipation of a story that would change the course of history. Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, his grip on the Israelites tightening with each passing day. His palace, a symbol of power and oppression, stood tall against the backdrop of a land yearning for freedom. The Pharaoh, with a stern face and unyielding resolve, ruled with an iron fist, his court filled with guards ready to enforce his every command. Fearing their growing numbers, he issued a cruel decree. Every newborn Hebrew boy was to be cast into the Nile River. The announcement echoed through the land, striking fear into the hearts of Hebrew mothers. They clutched their babies tightly, their eyes filled with dread and sorrow, knowing the fate that awaited their sons. Amidst this despair, a glimmer of hope emerged from the most unexpected of places. As the sun rose over the Nile, casting a golden glow on the water, a small basket floated gently on the river's surface. It was a symbol of defiance, a beacon of hope in a time of darkness. Jochebed, a Hebrew woman of unwavering faith, gave birth to a son, a child of extraordinary beauty and promise. She looked into his eyes, seeing a future that defied the Pharaoh's decree. Her heart swelled with love and determination, knowing she had to protect him at all costs. Unable to bear the thought of his death, she wove a basket of bulrushes, waterproofing it with bitumen and pitch. Each weave of the basket was a prayer, each stroke of bitumen a plea for his safety. She worked tirelessly, her hands guided by a mother's love and a desperate hope for her child's survival. Laying her precious child within, she set him adrift in the Nile, her heart heavy with a mother's love and a desperate hope. She watched as the basket floated away, tears streaming down her face, her prayers mingling with the river's current. She entrusted her son's fate to the waters, believing in a higher power to guide him. The river carried the basket downstream, guiding it towards fate. The gentle current cradled the basket as if the Nile itself was protecting the child within. The journey was serene, the water's surface reflecting the sky's promise of a new beginning. Pharaoh's daughter, bathing in the cool waters, spotted the basket and, moved by curiosity, ordered it brought to her. She was a woman of compassion, her heart open to the mysteries of life. As she reached for the basket, she felt a connection to the child within, a bond that transcended the boundaries of her royal lineage. As she peered inside, her heart melted at the sight of the crying infant. The baby's cries were a call for love, a plea for protection. She held him close, her heart filled with a fierce determination to keep him safe despite the risks. Knowing the child was Hebrew, she defied her father's decree and decided to adopt him as her own. Her defiance was an act of courage, a stand against the injustice of her father's rule. She named him Moses, meaning drawn out of the water, a testament to his miraculous survival. It was the child's sister, Miriam, watching from the reeds, who suggested a Hebrew woman nurse the infant. Her quick thinking and bravery ensured that her brother would be cared for by their own mother. Miriam's watchful eyes and unwavering faith played a crucial role in the unfolding of this divine plan. Thus, Jochebed, the child's own mother, was brought to care for him, a testament to God's subtle hand guiding their destinies. The reunion was bittersweet, filled with joy and sorrow. Jochebed nursed her son, her heart filled with gratitude and hope, knowing that he was destined for greatness. The child, named Moses, meaning drawn out of the water, was raised in the lap of luxury, privy to the finest education and opportunities Egypt offered. He grew up in the palace, surrounded by wealth and knowledge, yet his heart remained connected to his true heritage. The lessons he learned and the experiences he gained would one day shape him into a leader of his people. But deep within his heart, the whispers of his heritage lingered, waiting for the day they would erupt with the force of a raging fire. Moses often found himself lost in thought, contemplating his place in the world. He felt a calling, a purpose that went beyond the luxuries of the palace. The whispers of his past grew louder, guiding him towards his destiny, a destiny that would change the course of history forever. A burning bush and a divine call, Moses' destiny unfolds. This is the story of a man chosen by destiny, a man whose life would be forever altered by a divine encounter in the wilderness. Years passed, and Moses grew into manhood, straddling two worlds yet belonging to neither. Raised as an Egyptian prince, he enjoyed the luxuries and privileges of the Pharaoh's court. Yet, deep within, he felt a connection to his Hebrew roots, a bond that could not be severed by royal garments or palace walls. He witnessed the plight of his kin, their suffering a stark contrast to the opulence of the Pharaoh's court. The cries of the Hebrew slaves echoed in his heart, a constant reminder of the injustice that pervaded the land. The more he saw, the more he felt the weight of their suffering, a burden that grew heavier with each passing day. One fateful day, driven by a sense of justice, he intervened when he saw an Egyptian overseer beating a Hebrew slave. The sight of the overseer's whip striking the defenseless slave ignited a fire within him, a fire that could not be quenched by fear or hesitation. His act of defiance, however, had unintended consequences. The bystanders' shocked expressions mirrored the turmoil within him. He realized the gravity of his actions, understanding that he had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Word reached Pharaoh, forcing Moses to flee into exile. The once familiar streets of Egypt became a hostile territory, and he had no choice but to leave behind the life he had known. He journeyed far, crossing the desolate wilderness until he reached Midian, a land where he sought refuge and anonymity. The vast desert stretched before him, a harsh and unforgiving landscape that mirrored the desolation in his heart. It was in the wilderness, far from the gilded cages of Egypt, that Moses encountered the divine. The solitude of the desert provided a stark contrast to the bustling life of the palace, offering him a space for reflection and introspection. Tending to his flock, he came across an astonishing sight, a bush engulfed in flames yet unconsumed by the fire. The sight was both mesmerizing and terrifying, a phenomenon that defied the laws of nature. As he drew closer, a voice boomed from within the flames, calling out his name. "Moses! Moses!" The voice was powerful and commanding, yet it carried a sense of familiarity, as if it had been waiting for this moment. The voice identified itself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of his ancestors. This divine presence revealed a connection that spanned generations, linking Moses to a lineage of faith and promise. He had seen the suffering of his people in Egypt and had chosen Moses to be their deliverer. The weight of this divine mission pressed upon him, a call to action that could not be ignored. Moses, overwhelmed by the encounter, initially resisted, questioning his worthiness and fearing his own limitations. The enormity of the task seemed insurmountable, and he doubted his ability to fulfill such a monumental role. But God reassured him, promising to be with him every step of the way. The divine presence offered comfort and strength, a promise that he would not walk this path alone. He bestowed upon Moses signs and wonders, a staff that transformed into a serpent, and the power to inflict plagues upon Egypt. These miraculous signs were not just tools of persuasion, but symbols of divine authority and power. With a heart full of trepidation and faith, Moses accepted his divine calling, embarking on a journey that would forever change the course of history. His steps, though hesitant at first, grew more confident as he embraced his destiny, ready to lead his people to freedom. Let my people go. The confrontation with Pharaoh. Armed with God's authority and accompanied by his brother Aaron, Moses returned to Egypt. He stood before Pharaoh, demanding the release of the Israelites, proclaiming, "Let my people go, so that they may worship me in the wilderness." Pharaoh, arrogant and dismissive, scoffed at their request. "Who is the Lord," he retorted, "that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and moreover, I will not let Israel go." Pharaoh's heart, hardened by pride and the illusion of power, refused to yield. He mocked Moses and Aaron, intensifying the Israelites' labor, burdening them with even greater cruelty. Undeterred, Moses returned to Pharaoh time and again, pleading for their release, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. Each refusal brought with it a dire warning. God would unleash his wrath upon Egypt, demonstrating his power and the consequences of defying his will. Pharaoh, blinded by arrogance, remained unmoved, believing himself to be a god, his power absolute. A battle of wills had commenced, a clash between the God of Israel and the might of Egypt. The stage was set for a showdown of epic proportions, a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of both nations.